I had waited for this moment my entire life. The towering radio station loomed over me, its red on-air sign flickering against the midnight sky. It was my first night as an intern at WZRP 86.6, a station I had idolized since I was a kid. They called it the last voice of the night, a late-night talk show that played eerie stories and midnight confessions from listeners who couldn't sleep. I had always imagined the station would be buzzing with life, filled with producers, engineers, and hosts. But when I stepped inside, the air was still. Too still. The front desk was empty. The phones on the receptionist's counter sat lifeless. A soft hum of static buzzed from the speakers mounted on the ceiling. The station smelled of dust and old wires, the kind of scent that clings to forgotten places. I clutched my bag and stepped forward. "Hello?" My voice echoed down the hallway, swallowed by the walls. Then I saw her. A woman sat alone in the broadcast booth, facing the large microphone. She was thin, pale, her dark hair draped over her shoulders like wet seaweed. She stared at the mixing board, her fingers hovering over the knobs, though she never touched them. I knocked softly on the glass. I'm Nora, the new intern?" She didn't react at first. Then, with slow, deliberate movement, she turned her head towards me. Her lips curled into a strange, tight-lipped smile. She pressed a button and the intercom crackled to life. "You're late." I checked my watch. 11:59 p.m. My shift was supposed to start at midnight. Before I could answer, she motioned for me to come inside. Inside, the studio was cold. A single red bulb above the microphone bathed everything in a dim, hellish glow. The woman gestured to an empty chair beside her. "Sit," she said. I hesitated. Sorry, I didn't catch your name." Her eyes flicked toward me. Something about the way she looked at me made my skin prickle. "We don't use names here." I laughed nervously, expecting her to clarify. She didn't. Instead, she reached forward and flicked a switch. The station went live. The speakers hissed. The air filled with an unsettling silence. Then the phone rang. A single shrill ring that sent a spike of unease down my spine. The woman pressed the button. "You're on the air." At first, nothing, just crackling static. Then a voice, a ragged whisper. "He's in the walls." My breath hitched. I glanced at the woman, expecting her to say something, but she sat still, eyes locked on the microphone. "He's in the walls," the voice repeated, urgent now. "I hear him scratching. I can't sleep. He's coming closer." Click. The line went dead. I let out a nervous laugh. "Okay, that was creepy. Do we screen calls here, or?" The woman turned to me slowly. Her pupils were too wide, swallowing the whites of her eyes. "There are no calls." I stared at her. "What?" She tapped the dead phone line. The wires were cut years ago. Something scratched. It was soft at first. A faint rustling, like fingers trailing across drywall. Then a slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap. The sound came from behind the studio walls. I swallowed hard. "That's probably just the pipes, right?" The woman didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the on-air light, unblinking. Then she leaned into the microphone. "If you're listening, don't turn around." A shiver crawled up my spine. "What?" I started, but she placed a finger to her lips. And then I felt it. A presence. Behind me, the air grew heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to look. But something deep inside, something primal, begged me not to. A low, wet breath brushed against the back of my neck. I clenched my jaw. My heart hammered. The woman smiled. "That's why we don't use names here," she whispered. "It likes names." A shadow flickered across the studio window. I broke. I turned. The studio was empty, nothing but a dark hallway stretching into endless black. But the air was wrong. The space where something should have been still felt occupied. I spun back to the woman, breathless. "What the hell is going on?" She simply reached forward and flipped a switch. The broadcast ended. Silence. Then she stood and walked out. I was left alone in the studio, the microphone still warm from her breath. The on-air light had gone out, but I could still hear it. The whisper, a voice that was not mine, Nora. I never went back. I left that night, shaking, my pulse a hammer in my chest. The next morning, I tried to look up the station. There were no records of WZRP, no employee files, no broadcasts. It didn't exist, except it did. Because every night at 12 a.m. my radio turns on by itself, and I hear the whispers, I hear my name, I hear the scratching in the walls, and worst of all, sometimes I hear myself. But I never made those recordings, and I never spoke those words.